headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Carla Gonzalez. We start with the big news coming from the UK, where Prime Minister Theresa May is to face a no-confidence motion on Wednesday. 48 members of Parliament from the Conservative Party have challenged her leadership, triggering a vote of no confidence. A ballot will be held between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. local time, and votes will be counted immediately. Potential candidates to replace her include the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, the Home Secretary Sajid Javid, and the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, among others. Here's how she reacted after the news broke.
Sir Graham Brady has confirmed that he has received 48 letters from Conservative MPs, so there will now be a vote of confidence in my leadership of the Conservative Party. I will contest that vote with everything I've got.
Prime Minister May said she was due to travel to Dublin this afternoon to continue her work, but will now remain in London.
A change of leadership in the Conservative Party now will put our country's future at risk and create uncertainty when we can least afford it. A new leader wouldn't be in place by the 21st of January legal deadline, so a leadership election risks handing control of the Brexit negotiations to opposition MPs in Parliament. The new leader wouldn't have time to renegotiate a withdrawal agreement and get the legislation through Parliament by the 29th of March, so one of their first acts would have to be extending or rescinding Article 50, delaying or even stopping Brexit, when people want us to get on with it.
And now let's hear from our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, who has the latest.
So this morning has been another dramatic day in British politics, with the announcement this morning that the 1922 committee of the ruling Conservative Party had received more than 48 letters needed to initiate a leadership contest or a vote of confidence in British Prime Minister Theresa May. For that to happen, they needed to have received more than 15% letters from more than 15% of the Conservative Party MPs. There are 315, and they have announced that they've received more than the 48 required. So today, between 6 and 8 p.m, there will be a vote in the British Parliament on Theresa May's position. Were she to win, that would mean she would be safe from another similar vote for at least a year. In any case, she still finds herself in an extremely difficult position in terms of trying to get her Brexit deal through Parliament. As we know, she cancelled a vote that was scheduled to take place yesterday because she knew that she would have lost by a large amount, including at least 100 of her own MPs. Now, this morning, Theresa May has warned that should she lose a vote this evening on her leadership, that the Brexit process will be delayed. So that is clearly a kind of a coded threat to the pro-Brexit side of her party, who have been really behind the moves to have this vote of no confidence in Theresa May. So she is today fighting for her political survival. Many analysts say that the end game is near. However, it's not clear whether there are indeed more than, in order to lose, I should say, that she needs to more than 50% of those MPs, so roughly 78 MPs would need to vote against Theresa May today for that to happen. So it's not clear whether there is that they have those numbers, but we will know around 10 p.m. local time this evening.
That was Pablo Navarrete from the UK, and we'll continue following that news throughout the day. Now to another story. Bolivian President Evo Morales has condemned a fire set by protesters to an electoral court in the department of Santa Cruz. Morales said, quote, "We condemn criminal acts of the right that claim to defend the rule of law but which destroy state institutions." He said, yesterday in the name of autonomy they promoted racism and separatism. Today in the name of democracy they encourage violence and vandalism. They were protesting against his plans to run for re-election. And fire was set by the supporters of the far right and students from the University of Gabriel René Moreno, following protests against the president's move to run for a fourth term. Protesters were seen violently shaking a fence and scrambling through the court building as rockets were fired. Flames could be seen inside the court building and outside. The Vice Minister of Interior, José Luis Quiroga, also denounced the violence. According to the minister, the acts of violence are an attack on democracy in Bolivia, and he compared these acts to 2008, when separatist groups from Bolivia's right wing attempted a coup against President Morales. Now to Ecuador. Former Vice President Jorge Glass has brought his hunger strike to an end. On his Twitter account, Ricardo Patiño, the former foreign minister, wrote, "Our Vice President Jorge Glass accepted the request of his family, friends and comrades to end his hunger strike after 52 days. Your courage and dignity is an example for all. We will stay by your side until your innocence is recognized and you are free." And also in the country, economist and radio broadcaster Otto Sonnenholzner has been appointed as new Vice President of Ecuador. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has more details from Quito.
With 94 votes in favor and 27 votes against, the National Assembly elected economist and radio broadcaster Otto Sonnenholzner as the new Vice President of Ecuador. Assembly member Alberto Arias, representative of the province of Guayas and Alianza País party, was in charge of announcing the motion's approval. Journalist and director of the Triángulo Foundation, Nancy Vasco, and economist and education expert Agustín Albán were also on Moreno's list of proposals.
I thank the Assembly members for ratifying the will of our President. I hope that this is a sign of us being able to go forward together in everyone's interests. I also thank the social, business and political leaders who supported me unconditionally. I'm honoured to share this platform with Nancy Vasco and Agustín Albán.
Before starting the plenary session, the Citizen Revolution movement expressed their rejection of the list proposed by President Moreno, as well as the selection process for the candidates. They asked that the candidates and the new vice president be vetted to ensure they meet the requirements for the post.
We will ask for verification of legal requirements needed. Remember that it was the people who established that public officials must not be financed by entities or have money in tax havens. We want to know if every requirement has been fulfilled, if they have contracts with the government, or if these contracts are over. We don't have that information.
New Vice President Otto Sonnenholzner was accused of being part of the company Gallet Enterprises, located in Panama. According to a statement made by the Minister of the Interior, Maria Paula Romo, the new Vice President has no more shares in the company and is not its owner. After a 2017 referendum ordered by Moreno, it is forbidden for people with properties or money in tax havens to work in the public sector. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
More stories coming up. We'll be back.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur. Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight.
moments of hope, moments that transcend, moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Interior Minister of Chile, Andrés Chadwick, was questioned about the death of Mapuche member Camilo Catrillanca. Indigenous lawmaker Emilia Nullado questioned Chadwick on the details surrounding Catrillanca's murder. The young Mapuche man was killed on November 14 by security forces, sparking outrage and several protests. On Monday, a court revoked the preventive detention of 2 police officers accused of taking part in the killing. Venezuela's foreign ministry has rejected statements by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the use of public funds by the Venezuelan government. He said that the reaction of Pompeo against military cooperation between Russia and Venezuela is not only disrespectful and it is cynical. The U.S., he said, has at least 800 military bases in 70 countries. Today, 75 of the 107 United States programs for security cooperation are in Latin America. He also pointed out that it was unusual for the U.S. government to question their sovereign right to cooperation in defense and security with other countries, since Donald Trump publicly threatened with military intervention in Venezuela. If they want to cooperate, he said, they should lift their sanctions against Venezuela. Our correspondent Hans Eloro in Moscow explains the Kremlin's reactions to these comments.
Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov has said that the recent tweets by United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo were very inappropriate and of poor diplomatic choice. On Twitter, Pompeo strongly criticized stationing Russian bombers at the Venezuelan Simon Bolivar International Airport. The aircraft, including 2 nuclear-capable bombers, flew across the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean to land in Venezuela. In response, Peskov said that the United States could very well feed the entire African continent with all the money it spends on weaponry. In fact, the US defense budget for 2019 is expected to be $716 billion, $16 billion more than when compared with this year's budget. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the United States is one of the biggest arms sellers in the world, with 57% of all arms sales coming from the country. The United States has also expressed its disapproval of the latest investment deal between Venezuela and Russia. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro visited Moscow last week and agreed to support a more multilateral world with his counterpart, President Vladimir Putin.
Hans Eloro from Russia. A court in Argentina has handed down prison sentences to 2 former Ford executives for their part in complicity with the military dictatorship in the country. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Roth, has more.
This is indeed an historic day in Argentina. A court has condemned former managers of the Ford multinational company for crimes against humanity. This is the first verdict of its kind, not only for collaboration with the dictatorship, but for direct involvement by the businessmen in these crimes. The case dealt with events 42 years ago, when 24 workers were kidnapped and tortured. Most of them were shop stewards at the Ford factory at General Pacheco. All this was proven during the hearings in the case, which began in December 2017. The Ford manager not only handed over the names of the workers, but their files with photos and other personal details. They let the security forces into the factory and supplied transportation to take the arrested workers away. The court decided unanimously that the sentences should be served in common prisons. Pedro Mueller, The former head of production at Ford was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Hector Sibilia, the former head of security at the factory, received 12 years, while the armed officer Santiago Riberos got 15 years.
Sabrina Roth from Argentina. Now, around 100 migrants have marched to the U.S. consulate in Mexico's Tijuana city on Tuesday. This to deliver a petition requesting their asylum claims to be processed faster. Migrants holding flags of their native countries in Latin America walked along a highway to get to the consulate. They were stopped outside by Mexican police with riot gear.
We're only asking that they accelerate the process, that more people are able to pass through each day. That's all we're asking, and that, for us to apply for asylum, the same people from the government evaluate us and decide who really gets political asylum.
Also in Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has announced that a new investment agreement will be signed with the U.S., Canada, and Central American countries to tackle migration. He's also set to introduce a new oil production plan to address the issue of declining production. In 2013, the previous administration opened the Mexican energy sector to private investors.
It would mean investment. It would mean jobs. It would mean economic benefits. I am willing to travel, and there are about 10 daily flights to Washington and New York. It's no problem.
The Mexican government has announced it will provide thousands of humanitarian and working visas to Central American migrants. The government already handed out 600 visas to the members of the migrant caravan who are waiting at the border. With this, migrants will be able to access social and employment services. According to the UN, 7,000 migrants have left their countries in large groups over the last few months.
We have proceeded with a strategy, which is underway and will advance significantly, to grant visitor cards for humanitarian reasons to this entire group. By doing this, their situation in Mexico is normalized and guaranteed, and their routes and expectations widen.
Colombia's President Iván Duque has approved a proposal to the law that allows former FARC members to be arrested again. Under the proposal, former combatants can be arrested even if they signed the peace agreement. FARC combatants are now part of a political party with seats in Congress. A gunman has opened fire in a cathedral in the Brazilian city of Campinas, killing at least 5 people before committing suicide. Brazilian media reports that the man entered the church while Mass was being celebrated and began shooting with a revolver and a pistol. The motive and identity of the shooter were not immediately known. The International Monetary Fund is predicting economic growth for the Bahamas. As the country's economy continues to recover, GDP is projected to grow by over 2% in 2019. The Hubert Minnis government has also narrowed the fiscal deficit, and Bahamas is now preparing to pilot a digital currency. The IMF recognizes the role of such new financial technologies in mitigating potential risks to the economy. Defense ministers from Latin America and the Caribbean have vowed to boost cooperation on tackling terrorism, making the commitment to do so at the Western Hemisphere Counterterrorism meeting in Washington. Areas of discussion included regional and international terror threats, terrorism financing, and transnational criminality. The progress of new counterterrorism strategies in the region was praised.
Argentina has worked on reforming criminal laws to better prosecute terrorists. Trinidad and Tobago has established an interagency task force to gather terrorism-related intelligence that can be used as courtroom evidence.
Grenada's Prime Minister Keith Mitchell has called on Caribbean countries to facilitate easier regional travel and do away with heavy taxes that discourage free movement. He says there is also a need for a regional civil aviation authority. Mitchell's request comes less than a week after CARICOM leaders met to examine ways of improving the CARICOM single market and economy. He says there's a need to make the Caribbean great again, even as he urged the region to build relationships with the global partners to enhance economic prosperity. Mitchell also called for greater unity in improving security across the region. Intellectuals and social leaders from more than 50 countries will take part in the 4th International Conference for World Balance in Cuba's capital, Havana, next year. They will be discussing the importance of intercultural dialogue, diversity in arts, the role and challenges of social movements, and the struggle for peace. The conference is reported to be the largest global forum of plural thought, where ways of promoting peace will be discussed. It will take place on January 28th until the 31st. We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on culture, innovation, conservation, human well-being. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identities on By Gender. Cultural manifestations, the art in all its forms, and the stories of real lives. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.
And we're back. French Interior Minister Christophe Castaner announced that the man responsible for Tuesday's terrorist attack in Strasbourg is well known by security forces. He said the man previously served prison sentences in France and Germany for common offenses. He added that the attacker had been injured during the attack and an extensive manhunt involving hundreds of security agents has since been launched. At least 3 people have been killed and 12 injured in a shooting at a Christmas market.
Troops from the Sentinel Force used their weapons to try and intercept the attacker between 20 and 21 hours. He confronted our security forces 2 times. Each time shooting was involved. Counter-terrorism prosecutors are now working on the case. A manhunt is underway to arrest the attacker. It is a man very well known for many common law offenses for which he has already been convicted here and in Germany, and for which he has already served his sentences. 350 people have been mobilized on the field to try to stop his escape.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has declared an economic and social state of emergency following the Yellow Vest protests. The government has been pressured to change the fuel tax bill and other policies that will impoverish the working class. The Yellow Vest movement opposes the fuel tax rises, and over 1,000 people have been detained as protesters have been clashing with police who have used tear gas. On Tuesday, a Canadian court granted the release on bail of Huawei's CFO Meng Wanzhou, who was arrested in Canada and is facing extradition to the United States. Meng will be subject to electronic monitoring and has to surrender her passport as a condition. The extradition process is scheduled to begin on February 6 and could take months if appeals are made in the case. China has warned Canada over their foreign ministry that what is called grave consequences over Meng's arrest and had demanded her release.
The detention of Meng Wanzhou from the very beginning, it is a wrong action. We have made our position clear to the Canadian and U.S. governments. They should immediately correct their mistakes and release her.
A 4-year-old Palestinian child has died after being injured by Israeli gunfire at the Gaza border. According to local reports, the child was shot in the eye by Israeli snipers during Friday's protests, and he succumbed to his injuries. Earlier this week, another Palestinian man was shot by the Israeli forces on suspicion of car ramming. Since the Great March of Return started on May 15, at least 195 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces. And before we end, we remember that Tuesday marked the day in 1964 when Ernesto Che Guevara gave an historic speech to the General Assembly of the United Nations as a representative of Cuba. Let's listen.
Now history will have to tell the tale of the poorest, the exploited, and the disgraced from Latin America, who have decided to write their own stories forever. This wave of justice and rights won't stop. It will grow more every day, because the wave is made up by the majority, who accumulate richness through their work, those who create value and make the wheels of history move. Now they are waking up from their long and brutalizing dream to which they have been submitted. This great humanity has said enough and started to walk forward. And its Giants March will not stop until true independence, for which many have already died without reason. Now, those who die will die like Cubans, like those on Huron Beach. They will die for their truth and their irrenounceable independence.
And with that historic speech, we come to the end of this news brief. For this and other stories you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, we are on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria. And we're on social media as well, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.